pre-conference. My name is Lisa Badger. I am on the board of directors of Creative Cities Network of Canada, and I'm also this year's chair for the Public Art Network. I know on behalf of both groups, we're thrilled to see such a wonderful attendance today. So welcome to you all. A little bit of housekeeping, and if anybody could please turn your cell phones to vibrate, that would be appreciated. So I would like to start today by thanking our sponsor, the City of Richmond, and we very much appreciate your sponsorship of today's pre-conference. Without, we wouldn't be having things like this. So thank you very much, Eric, and all your attendance today. We've got a very busy afternoon for you, and we're very, very thrilled to have our keynote speaker here today, Jill Anholt. We'll be beginning with her keynote, and that will then be followed by a panel presentation. So I will begin by introducing you to Jill. Jill is a visual artist based in Vancouver, BC, who has been creating site-specific works in the public realm since 1998. Her practice ranges from complex integrated works, parks, pedestrian walkways, transit stations, small-scale installations in buildings and public plazas across North America. Her installations explore the relationship between nature and infrastructure, body and place, revealing layers of personal and cultural memory and experience. Environmental sustainability plays a generative role in her conceptual developments, form, material expression of many of her works. Along with her art practice, Jill is an instructor at Anholt University of Art and Design in Vancouver. And Jill will be presenting a keynote today on public art in transportation, a change in context. Please welcome Jill Anholt.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. So I'm going to be kind of turning my head to look at where the slides are at a little bit here because I don't have a screen here. Thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here and to have a chance to talk a little bit about public art in transportation and also to work with both Helena and Barbara to talk about a number of other issues related to transportation and public art. So as Lisa said, I've been working in the field of public art for almost 18 years now. I have worked at a variety of different scales in a variety of different places. My work is very context related. I begin every project really trying to understand all the layers of a place, and the work develops from that. So the ideas, the concepts, materials, I never come with a fixed idea before I start a project, and I really try to take a lot of time to understand the context of the work in which I'm involved. Along with my own artwork, I also have written a number of art plans and art strategies. And with regards to transportation specifically, I've installed 4 transportation-related projects and also worked on a transportation-related art plan for the city of Calgary. So today what I thought would be maybe most interesting was to just talk about 2 projects, recent projects in transportation, both of them for LRT stations, that have very, very different sort of context to them and parameters. And I thought it might be useful to just sort of understand how an artist, or how I approached the projects, what the results were, what some of the issues, constraints, opportunities were, and that would just sort of open up a panel discussion about some of these things as well. So, just in talking about context, you know, for a long time we always talked about site, and artists were always talking about site responsive, site specific, but now we really have kind of expanded that thinking, and it's not just site. So site context can involve things like, you know, all the layers, the history, geology, environment, social parameters, all of those sorts of things. But it also is all the parameters of the project, like how is the project set up? Who are the players? What's the timing like? What is the budget. Like, there's so many things around the project itself that are context related that an artist has to think about. And then there's the relationships inherent in the project. So there's the community around or near or surrounding this project. There are the stakeholders. There are the design team. There's the city agencies. There's just multiple sort of layers, all of which can inform the direction an art project takes. And then the other thing to say about context is it never stays the same. It's always changing and shifting, and I think maybe in transportation more than any environment, that's the case. So I'm going to talk about a project. The first project I'm going to speak about was a project in Calgary, completed in 2012, called Transit Story. And this was a very different kind of context and different opportunity. If any of you know Calgary, Calgary has a very active sea train route, and if you ever travel in it, you most likely go through the central core where there's a strong east-west connector. It's called 7th Avenue, and all the lines go through there. It has about 150,000 travelers a day on it, and it's one of the most well-known streets in the city, but for a long time was one of the least liked because it was so dark, and because of the transit corridor, their sidewalks were small, and the large buildings, there wasn't a lot of light getting in, and it was just a bit of an unfriendly place. And I was involved in some visioning sessions back in 2008 for 7th Avenue, and then also with the transportation project for Calgary. And a lot of it had to do with changing the stations, the LRT stations, from, on the left, what you see in 2005, which were these kind of lower, kind of darker stations, to these canopies that were much more buoyant and light-filled and glassy, and kind of just opening up that whole 7th Avenue. And so all the stations along 7th Avenue underwent this kind of change, and along with that, at the time, a lot of the public art, which was very much tied to the capital expenditures, in a sense I think has opened up a little bit, but at the time, a lot of that public art along 7th Avenue had to do with artists being involved with the canopy structures. So there's a couple of works on the top you'll see where artists integrated their works with the canopy. And then there was also other works that had to do with gateway elements and lighting elements along 7th Avenue. So the project I was worked on was not either of these. It was a very unusual project in that I actually had won a competition to do a pedestrian bridge, and the project got canceled, and the money was kind of floating around for a little while. And then because this one station was kind of on one end of 7th Avenue, and they decided not to turn it into a new station because it wasn't that old, and they thought maybe they'd just retrofit it. So through the business development, through downtown, through the city, and through public art, they decided we could shift the money from my pedestrian project to this location. And this location was very, very challenging. It was a low canopy, very tight circulation-wise, and had been felt by many to be a very unsafe station. A lot of people were sleeping on these grates here because they had hot air coming up from the lower parking garage. And so a lot of people were kind of hanging out there, and just was kind of not a great place, kind of dark and dismal. So I was, the project I was given, I was asked to create an artwork, and it had very, very specific requirements to it. It had to be located on the grates. Actually, I think I wrote down all the things. So the location had to be directly on the grates so that it wouldn't interfere with pedestrian movement. The art needed, there was a hope that the art would actually help people from stop sleeping on the grates, but at the very least make the station feel safer. The art has to be very robust to endure power washing and physical abuse. And also, at the same time, you could not include the air coming out of the grates. So that was how that project started. And so the one thing I could say that was great about that is, as overwhelming as the constraints were, I was given the opportunity to come to Calgary, to talk with the stakeholders and the businesses, to spend time at the station, and to really think about this. And I just decided not to think of it as a bunch of constraints, but really to try to open it up and try to find what opportunities were there. And a lot of what I did was just to ride the sea trike back and forth all over the place and just sort of try to be more observant than I normally was. And one of the things I really noticed was that when you're waiting in a station with other people, you feel safe. Even though you don't really talk to them, you don't engage directly with them, when you're in a crowd, you feel safer, you feel like you're part of this community. And I started looking at the people and noticing, you know, somebody looked upset or somebody was carrying a big box, and I started really thinking about their stories of what were they doing, and realizing we just tend to almost ignore each other. We know we're there, but we don't really engage with each other in these places. And we're part of this community that's there for a little while and then it disperses and reforms again. So that was really interesting to me, and in a way, it made me think about the greats themselves as this sort of area of nothingness and presence. And so that was really the sort of spark that began this process. And I looked at all of these sort of population and started to think about them being there and not there, and then there and not there at the same time. And it was an idea that sort of worked with all the constraints. So kind of thinking about the greats becoming people, so the airflow wasn't occluded, but also at the same time could bring color and light and life and bring a community that was always there in this way to the station. So, you know, a lot of my process is physical models and trying to figure out how to make these and what the shapes were, and how also to work with a sense of movement, both the train moving past these figures, but also people moving past them, and how they would work on the station. So kind of looking at shapes and forms, and at the same time, all the constraints we are dealing with you know, it can't be too big a spacing that a child could get their head caught in it, and all the sharp edges and certain kinds of paint, and they had to be strong enough, again, power washing, and somebody couldn't lean on them. And it was just really, really challenging. Working to sort of more developed models, and really trying to define a community that was really broad, the children and women and people that were perhaps in wheelchairs and different ages, that you could actually sort of capture a real community, a really diverse community. So these are the works under fabrication. We made templates to fabricate them all, and an incredible amount of masking for painting, because each piece is painted a different color on each side, and I'll show you why and how that works. And then also we installed lights under the grates so that these figures and the grates would light up at night as well, kind of bringing more life to the station. So here is looking at the grates and the sort of mute community that lives here from one side, and it's a very kind of cool color from one side and a very warm color from the other. And what's nice is that people, you know, sit amongst them. They become, the real people and the great people become kind of part of the same community. There's sort of, I love that people can find, even though they're, you know, vague forms, they can see a relationship to themselves within the pieces. And Rod's going to set this up. This is supposed to play. I'll just show you what happens when you move past. And so they kind of disappear when you look right at them, and then from another side they reform again. So we just try to capture that sort of being there and not being there at the same time. So the color shift really worked well with that. One of the things that's really rewarding for an artist is I've come to this station and seen people put scarves and sweaters and hats on them, and you know, I think people really have become kind of attached to them as people or as a community at the station. Thanks. Really. So I'm going to talk about one other project that is vastly different in terms of the context, and this one we just finished, in fact, just a week ago. Barbara and I were toasting the completion of what was a very long project in Seattle. called Immerse. And so this project, I was selected about 4 years ago for a project that was for a new LRT extension, the first station south of SeaTac Airport. And the project was for a stormwater conveyance system. So it was, the idea was that an artist was hired to kind of enliven the way that water moves from the platform to the stormwater catchment below in some interesting way to draw attention to that system. It was an RFQ followed by an interview, and so I began working on this project, and again, quite a challenging project because there's a lot of parameters around water and how you can work with it and where it can go. And I worked for, I guess, about a year on that project, and we got close to a final design. And then at the same time, what happened is that the station, there was an expansion or a second project that came right beside the station, which was the development of a whole plaza and a parking garage, a much larger project that had additional budget associated with it. So Barbara Lukey, who's the public art manager, felt that, you know, that the work I was working on was fine, but maybe didn't have the same impact it could have with this larger opportunity, a larger plaza, a larger sort of amount of money. And so a very interesting opportunity arose where I was asked to be an artist for a site that didn't really exist. So I was asked, so that this new project was going to be a design-build project, so they asked for proposals from 3 different design-build teams, but I had the ability to be on first, and that never happens to an artist, to be the first one on the design team. So, so I was asked to kind of start talking about design parameters, to sort of lay a context for art or for ideas that the design-build team had to respond to. So almost the opposite of the way things normally happen. So, you know, there was an opportunity to sort of influence the overall station, but very challenging to kind of talk about ideas for something that doesn't exist. There was an overall theme for all of these stations of environment in motion that was determined by an artist who wrote the art plan. So that was kind of we were all working within that sort of general idea. So, so I produced this just sort of 1-page document that went to all the design build teams, and without knowing really what I was doing, I was interested in this idea about the patterns, the textures, the way that rain falls, and I didn't know what it would be, but I felt that it would be somehow spatial, somehow that people would be able to participate within it, be part of it, that they would be able to sort of sense the patterns and textures of rain in some really unique way. So this was just, you know, evocative without being, you know, prescriptive in terms of what might happen. And this went to all the design build teams. And then this was just some of the words within that. That was quite small, but looking at micro and macro perspectives. This is a station very close to the airport, so there's a chance that people would, you know, fly over it, but also look at it from within the plaza, from below the plaza, multiple perspectives. And I was really interested in just this experience that all of us have playing in puddles with rain when we're kids. It's something that we do, and again, we sort of stop as we get older, we stop thinking about it or noticing it, and rain becomes a drag, not something to be, not something to see in a different way. So I wondered if there was a different way for us in the Pacific Northwest to think about rain. So I was looking at patterns, textures, I was looking at physics, all of these things without really knowing what this was going to be. So this was the winning design build team, came back with a plaza design, and they incorporated my thinking into their plaza design. So they developed a plaza with all sort of turns and curvilinear lines and flows and fluctuations, and all of this sort of related to the original ideas that came through, which was great. And But it's also challenging to find a place for art within this because it was so over-designed and so difficult. So kind of you take your ideas, but then they're over-adopted in a way. So I had some early ideas looking at could something be incorporated into the ground plane? Could something be incorporated into this one kind of element within the plaza, which is a stairwell? And it became quite clear to me that, and to others, that the groundwork, there's just too much going on there, and it's just too difficult to do something in the ground. And really that there was this chance with something in this stairwell that you could, again, perceive it from multiple perspectives. And so we started with just a kind of some early ideas, but started to really work on how could something be installed in this stairwell. And there's a lot of things to work with. In most situations, and I think it's probably the same in Canada, there's people don't like site welding. It's hard to come to a site and site weld. It's really difficult. So this whole piece had to be designed to be built off-site and bolted into position in a very organically shaped space. It had a 40-foot span, so it was enormous. And so the engineering for this was just overwhelming. I really wanted something that was, it had to be very, very strong, but at the same time feel delicate. So it was a very challenging kind of set of parameters to work with. And so this was sort of a site or a plan that shows you just sort of the piece sort of suspended up in this area. So you have the ability to see it from above, from below, from the plaza, from the staircase, something where you have multiple perspectives and really can engage with it in different ways. And this is just some renderings that sort of show the intention for the work, called Immerse, and from above. And then I'll just show you, so these are huge. And this is the pieces at our fabricator shop. They're larger than a person, about 7 feet tall, and with large, large sort of pipes, all of which had to be designed to be like a mechanical set, bolted together and dropped into a very tiny space. And you can imagine you can drop 4 of the 5, but when you hit the 5th, you're really worried. And because you can do as many surveys as you like, but really nothing ever normally works out. But we had such an amazing fabricator. They dropped it in, there's a 16th of an inch between the plate and the edge. Just phenomenal. Never seen anything like it. I'll show you a few pieces of the, few shots of the art in place. These are mine. It hasn't been professionally shot, so they're not very good photos, but you'll get a sense of it. So you can see just a little hint of the work as you enter the plaza, and then as you kind of move around, you see these shapes that talk about the dispersal of a raindrop as it moves out, and then from below. And the light kind of creates some really interesting patterns and shadows as you move into and below the work. And then from above, we were testing the lights, and so I'll show you just the last couple of photos I have are some of the light testing, and it will not be multicolored as you're going to see, but we had some problems with a couple lights, but you'll get a sense of what it feels like. And as you're moving down through the staircase, and from the side, from the other side, and then from below. And so Barbara and I, we just finished this, and finally, and yeah, I think that's actually my last slide. So, thank you.